Now we're getting near the end of the project. We've taken care of a bunch of administrative stuff. We've gathered the information. We've run the analyses. We've found ways to present the results. We've provided the clients with interpretations for the results and potential paths to actionable solutions. The deliverables are concrete products, physical evidence if you want, that the consultants hand over to the client to help them actually find their actionable solutions. It's not just interpreting the result. Throughout the consulting process, you will be providing concrete products to the clients to help them find actionable solutions. In a sense, these deliverables are a proof that the work that you're getting paid to do has been done. In many instances, the clients don't have a technical background. They have to take you at your word when you say you've done something for them or that you solved the problem. Well, these deliverables, which should, in theory, be handed in at various points throughout the process, not just at the end, that will help them take you at your word. What are some of the deliverables you might end up giving to the clients? Look, it could be an actual tool, some code, some software, apps. Perhaps they have people internally that can look at these and understand what's been done. It could also be pseudocode, conceptual ideas that will be passed on to their IT people, and they will be the ones actually implementing it. That's a possibility as well. You might give them a literature review. You might give them a literature review of similar cases, similar projects, some case study write-up so that they have a better understanding of what other people have done in the past when faced with the same situations. It could be a list of recommendations or expert advice. If it's a long-term project, you will send in weekly or monthly progress reports, minutes of meetings you've had with the client, not the internal minutes of your meetings with your fellow consultants. A quality plan. In some instances, you're going to work with ISO certified companies and you have to produce the type of documents that make it clear that you're following a series of steps that are required in order to stay ISO certified. Once the project is done, or once the analysis has run its course, you will have to deliver a final report. A presentation very often, perhaps a poster or some executive summary, something that describes what the project is in easy to understand terms for people who do not have a technical background. Perhaps you'll also need to provide a user manual, or you might even write a paper or journal article out of it with the client or on your own. If you're going to be writing a journal article, make sure that you have their permission. Now, what the project deliverables will be, that depends. It depends on the client, it depends on the project, it depends on what's been agreed to. In most instances, you can expect to have to write a final report and to give a presentation at the very least. You're probably going to hand over some code as well, or a cleaned up data set. That could also be a deliverable. If you write code, if you prepare software or apps, make sure you document your code and that you test it prior to the delivery or prior to the demonstration. I have to tell you that Murphy's Law is in effect. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Nothing looks worse on the consultant than code that doesn't work. Run practice sessions to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do. Your code should use programming guidelines. Make damn sure that there's no offensive comments or funny variable function names in there. Right? You are delivering a professional product. This isn't the place to name your variables about the members of the Avengers. We use progress reports to let the client know what you've done and what remains to be done, to let them see that you have a good idea as to what the path going forward is going to be. Keep to the essentials. Tell them what is new since the last time you've given them a progress report, what is left to do, what subject matter experts will be needed in the near future, your timeline estimates if they've changed. If the plan has changed, let them know that the plan has changed or that the plan needs to change. How often you send in these progress reports should be arranged with the client. Some clients really want to hear from you regularly. Perhaps they've been burned in the past. You shouldn't really have to do this more than once a week. Let's be honest, it's not something that consultants like to do, but it is going to help you manage your project. So prepare some template that you can use and reuse on a weekly basis. Send it as often as required by your agreement. This is also something you should do internally. There should be progress reports for the team, not just for the client. You'll use different documents for this one, obviously. Perhaps minutes of your meeting, notes. But this is quite important for the project manager. And I need to remind you that project management is super, super, super important. You might luck out and manage to finish everything on time for all of your projects, but it's a risky approach to take, to tackle projects without project management. Since we usually have to hand in a final report, I'll spend a bit of time here telling you what should be found in there. At the very least, you should have the following sections. There should be an executive summary, some background information, some objective information, some methodology. A lot of this you can just lift from the proposal, or at least use what you had put in for these sections in the proposal. Here's something you don't have in the proposal: results. You might have tables and figures here. You should leave a fairly large section for discussion of these results and an interpretation, which should easily segue into the recommendations that you are making as the expert, as a consultant. Don't skimp on references and technical appendices. You probably don't want to put a proof in the body of the report. Certainly not in the executive summary. Anything of a technical nature might have to go in the appendices. There's two approaches to writing. Perhaps in some cases, the consultants have to tell the story of the project in a popular account. There you can use a free-flowing prose. But in other instances, you should err on the side of caution and use technical writing. We will talk about technical writing later. It's a generalization, but quantitative people don't typically come with a great writing background. You need to hone your writing. Your project is only as good as the way you write it up. It doesn't matter how clever you are, how clever the analysis is. If you cannot transmit or convey the results in a useful manner, you have failed. It's not sufficient to know how to write well. It's not sufficient to convey information properly. You have to have information to convey, or results that can lead to actionable insights. But if you cannot convey the information in that report, just say what needs to be said. But you got to do so in a manner that the client will understand and that will be useful to them. The executive summary will include the recommendations, because that's an important section of the report, and the highlights of the final report. That summary goes to stakeholders. They might not even know that the project has been undertaken. Take the time to proofread the report for spelling, for grammar, and style. You should be consistent throughout. If you use the passive voice, use the passive voice throughout. You should probably use the active voice, but be consistent. That matters more. If you don't feel that spelling and grammar and style are your strengths, get outside help. Obviously, a lot of these things take place in the language of business. In the West, that usually means English. As I'm sure you've noticed by now, I am not a native English speaker. As I go through these slides every once in a while, I recognize some spelling mistakes, some grammar mistakes. Nobody's expecting you to speak like the Queen would, especially if it's not your first language. but try to stay consistent, try to stay coherent. For people who do not have a technical background and who may feel threatened by quantitative analysis, one of the things that they will hold on to is if you make spelling mistakes. You are giving them a reason to just ignore what you said, which is probably, in many instances, what they want to do. Don't give them that reason. You should make the report appealing, but that being said, try to avoid fancy fonts, especially Comic Sans Serif, and unusual font sizes. Stick to some of the tried, tested, and true fonts. Helvetica, Arial, Times New Roman. I use a professional font that I've purchased a little while back because it looks really fancy, Dagny Pro, but funky fonts get old really, really quickly. If you're going to be using mathematical notation, you might want to consider using LaTeX instead of Word Editor. It's much easier to type, or Markdown, which imports the LaTeX mathematical notation engine. If you're going to be using LaTeX, you'll have to learn how to use it for everything but the mathematics as well. The default settings in LaTeX may seem perfectly fine to people with a math and stats background, but the default font and the default margins look odd to people without a math and stats background who are used to Calibri that came with Word.